Um, this current downturn started probably last December, and so what we've seen so far is 7 or 8 states, I think, that have been in major recession. Those are largely the ones that rode up the housing. So Nevada, California, Arizona, Florida, major impacts. You've also got from the auto industry and so on in the Midwest, Ohio, Minnesota, clearly Michigan, having struggled. The energy and agriculture states have been doing quite well. There's 10 to 12 states there. Some states, like West Virginia, have surpluses of 14%. They've been doing fairly well. I thought for a while we were going to struggle through this downturn, but this August jump in unemployment up to 6.1%, and a loss of 85,000 jobs, and also a re-estimate for the previous 2 months is telling me now that, unfortunately, I think things are going to get somewhat worse. That's going to be largely because of the subprime. We have another year and a half of people trickling on to those, beginning to run into problems with the value of the dollar increasing, which is going to hurt exports, and so on. And the other thing we always have to keep in mind is if you look at states, you find that the bigger impact is not during the recession, but it's actually the year after and 2 years after the downturn. And that's primarily because of the growth in Medicaid. By the time people become unemployed, they come on the rolls, and spending starts to increase, it's very much after the economy has already turned around. So unfortunately, I have to say that right now I'm concerned that we're going to be in a struggle for 3 to 4 years, even if the economy were to begin to turn up within the next year. I hate to leave you with that thought, but Eric told me I needed to be honest. Let's shift now and let's look at the federal budget. Right now, the best estimate is that the next president, next fiscal year, which starts really October 1 in about 3 weeks, the deficit is projected to be about $480 billion. Now, the highest number we've had in the past is $413 billion. So that's already beginning to grow quite dramatically. We probably have to add about $80 billion in revenue loss or increases in the deficit due to the alternative minimum tax, which we're going to have to put a tax on. So that's probably going to bring it up another 80 billion or so, 80 to 100, so we're in the range of 580 billion. To that, we'll probably have to add spring supplementals and fall supplementals, and one of which will have to be a fairly significant one due to the continuing war in Iraq and Afghanistan. So that means, depending upon how aggressive they are there, probably at least another 70 or 80 billion dollars. So in terms of obligations and so on, the next president is probably going to inherit a deficit in the neighborhood of $650 billion. Now that assumes that the economy is actually continues to grow at a decent rate, a decent 1.5% for the remaining year and 2.2%. I think there are more risks around that. The economy may in fact slow, and one of the other concerns is inflation is now beginning to move up. Social Security is, by legislation, linked to Social Security, to the CPI, and therefore I think all the risk is really on the upside, not on the downside. So, point number one, the deficit is growing. It's growing pretty rapidly, and it's going to put pressure to hold down that portion of the budget where most grants and everything come from, which is the domestic discretionary portion of the budget. The second point is that entitlements continue to grow. If you look at the CBO projections, they have Medicaid assuming an 8% growth over the next decade. Medicare is just a little bit under 7%. Social Security about 6%. And their assumption in terms of growth of domestic discretionary generally assume that just enough for inflation, which is around 2%. So unfortunately, the second point is, as you continue in the out years, not only do you start with a fairly large deficit, but when you've got revenues either of a good economy going 5.5%, you're still going to have increasing pressure because of the huge growth in Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, as well as interest on the public debt. Now, what about economic stimulus? You're here discussed again right now, particularly on the House side. I think over the next 2 or 3 weeks, their hope is to try to pull together an economic stimulus plan. It's hard to tell exactly what's in it, but there is some possibility that it would include an FMAP increase for Medicaid, probably some infrastructure. It could include some additions in food stamps, LAHI, low-income energy assistance, and so on. I think, however, though, at the end of the day, it's probably going to be hard to get it out of the Senate, and it's probably going to be difficult to get it by the president. So my own sense is this sort of shot at stimulus really over the next several weeks will not see a bill signed by the president. So what does that mean? That means it's probably going to be on the table again for the next president. So come January, February, March, there's going to be another evaluation of do we need an economic stimulus. I think it's difficult to know at this time, but I think there are still signs that the economy will struggle between the subprime, the increase in the value of the dollar. Although everybody says it's nice that oil prices are down, you got to remember that they're down from $145 a barrel, but they're up from the $70 just a year ago. So that is going to continue to create some problems. So we'll sort of see, but I think the first thing up is a decision with respect to that stimulus. Can they get the economy going or not? In terms of grants to state and local government, if you look at the total component right now, it's running about $180 billion. The big pieces of that is out of the Department of Agriculture. You've got about $6 billion WIC and a lot of the low-income food programs. Department of Education, you got about $51 billion. HHS about 24. HUD with a lot of their housing programs, 37. And then DOT at about 55 billion, which are the very, very big ones. Now, in terms of appropriations for this next fiscal year, which again starts October 1, I think the current thinking is right now is to do a continuing resolution that really goes into the next president. So I would expect them to try to do it into the end of March.